The Katha Upanishad in simple English, part 2, consisting of the remaining two sections of chapter 1. Nachiketa is adamant and says to the Lord of Death, Lord, please reveal to me the great mystery of death, whether on passing away a person still lives on, or whether he dies. What is there in the great passing on? This is the third boon that I, Nachiketa, choose and none other. The Lord of Death replies, Nachiketa, there are two different paths a person can take during his lifetime. One is the path of the ever abiding, everlasting, and eternal good, the path leading to the joy of the self, to the imperishable region of the spirit. The other is the transient and short lived path of the pleasant, of what is pleasing and gives pleasure to the senses, to the perishable region of the physical world. Both these paths, with different purposes, bind man. Of the two, the path of the ever abiding and everlasting good is the better one. He who takes this path of the good, the path leading to the joy of the spirit, he does well. He progresses and reaches his goal. He attains salvation. On the other hand, he who takes the path of the pleasant, who takes the path pleasing to the senses, he fails in his aim and does not reach his goal. He does not attain salvation. Both the good and the pleasant approach man. The wise man ponders over both. He considers the merits of both. He discerns and discriminates. He chooses the difficult path of the good and the abiding over the easy path of the pleasant and the transient. The simple and the dull minded, however, for ease, for convenience, and for worldly well being, choose the easy path of what is pleasant to the senses. But you, Nachiketa, after examining both the paths, have rejected the way of wealth and physical pleasure, which are the cause of ruin of most mortals. You have rejected all worldly desires that are tempting and only appear to be pleasant. Wisdom and ignorance are two extremes. They are wide apart and lead to very different and opposite ends. Wisdom leads to the realization of the self, it leads to liberation, while ignorance leads one in the opposite direction, away from liberation to bondage. I know that you, Nachiketa, are eager for wisdom, as you were not distracted by the many temptations and allurements offered by me. You are indeed worthy of receiving such instruction, Nachiketa. Those who live in the midst of ignorance, but are unaware of their ignorance, those who are ignorant of their own ignorance, yet who imagine themselves as wise and learned, such people are vain, deluded, and foolish. They go round and round in circles, like blind men led by one who is himself blind, unable to reach their goal, since they do not know what or where their goal is. The glamour of wealth both deludes as well as blinds. It makes people arrogant, careless, and dull. It restricts their vision and prevents them from seeing what lies beyond this life. They think there is only this world, only this exists. There is no other higher world. Thinking thus, they die again and again. They fall into my power again and again. Very few hear of the Atma, the Self, and of the few that hear of the Self, fewer still get to know the Self, and of these, very few again actually reach the Self. Rare is one who can speak about the Self, and who can teach about the Self, and wise is one who can be taught, and wonderful and rarer still is the one who knows the self when taught by an able teacher. Since the self, the Atma, is thought of in many ways, it cannot be truly understood if taught by an inferior person, if taught by one who is himself not a realized one, unless taught by one who has known the self and who is himself realized. Unless taught by such an illumined teacher, it would be difficult to attain and understand the self, as it is more subtle than the subtle itself. The self cannot be understood through thinking or through intellectual power, or through reasoning or through arguments, but only if taught by a realized and illumined teacher can this self be well understood. You have obtained this wisdom leading to the understanding of the self, Nachiketa, by your strong desire for obtaining the truth. May we have more seekers and inquirers like you, Nachiketa. I know that wealth is not permanent. It is transient and not everlasting. Through transient and temporary means or things, the permanent or the abiding one cannot be reached. Yet, I have been able to reach the everlasting and the eternal by the Nachiketa fire which was laid out by me. Although you have seen all that I have offered you, the fulfillment of all your desires, the support of the world, the endless fruit of rites and rituals and of works done by you, the other world of heaven, where there is no fear and no death, wealth, and also the greatness of fame, you have very wisely let them all go. The wise man who, through self contemplation and meditation, realizes and sees that primal God who dwells deeply in the cave of the heart of all beings, who is hidden deep within all beings, and who is difficult to see, such a wise one becomes free from both joy and sorrow, leaving them both behind in the world of men. Hearing this and understanding this, a mortal extracts the essence and reaches the subtle state, reaching which he rejoices, having attained the very source of joy. I know that such a dwelling, such an abode, is wide open for you, Nachiketa. Hearing all this, Nachiketa says, Lord, tell me that which you see, and which lies beyond right and wrong, beyond what is done or not done, and even beyond the past and the future. Yam replies, that is Om. Om is the word which all the Vedas declare, which all the austerities proclaim, and desiring which people are more than willing to live the tough and difficult life of religious students, of brahmacharis, of strict celibates. The syllable Om is truly the everlasting spirit. It is indeed the highest goal, the highest end. It is the end of evolution. Knowing this very syllable, whatever anyone desires will indeed be his. All his desires will be fulfilled. The support of Om is the best and the highest support. Knowing this support, one becomes great in this world of mortal men. The knowing self, the Atma, is never born, nor does it die at any time. It is not born from anything, nor was anything born from it. The Atma is unborn. It is eternal. It is abiding and it is primeval. It is not killed when the body is killed. It does not die when the body dies. If the slayer thinks that he kills the Atma, or if the slain thinks that he is killed by the Atma, then both do not understand and both do not see the truth. For the Atma neither kills nor is it killed. The Self, the Atma, is set in the heart of every being. It is smaller than even the smallest. It is greater than even the greatest. All objects, be they of earth or even of heaven, distract the soul and distort and limit the vision of man. But the man who is free from the desire of all such external objects beholds the Atma freed from sorrow. Through the tranquillity of the mind and the senses, as a result of the absence of desire, strife, and anxiety, he sees the greatness of the Self, of the Atma. Though stationary, he travels and moves far. Though lying down, he goes everywhere. Who but me is fit to know that God who rejoices and rejoices not? The Self is bodiless among those who have bodies. He is stable among the unstable. He is great and he is all pervading. Knowing the Self as such, the wise man does not grieve. The Self cannot be attained by instruction or by teaching. He cannot be attained by intellectual power or even by hearing again and again. He can be attained only by one whom the Self chooses. To such a one, the Self reveals its true nature. The Self cannot be reached even through right knowledge by one who has not given up evil ways or who continues to follow the path of evil. The Self cannot be reached by one who is not tranquil and whose mind is not composed, or by one who does not have a concentrated mind. The person who considers both priesthood and nobility, who considers the renunciation as well as the enjoying of the world, who considers both of these as food to be eaten, and who considers death as a sauce for enhancing the taste of the food, the person who both enjoys and renounces the world, and who does not fear death, he is one who really knows where the Self is. Indeed, he is one who really knows the Self. There are two birds that eat the fruit of karma in the world of good deeds. Both live in the secret place of the heart, the chief seat of Brahm, the Supreme. The knowers of Brahm, the householders who maintain the 5 sacrificial fires, and those who perform the triple Nachiketa sacrifice, all of these speak of them as shade and light. The Nachiketa fire is the bridge for those who sacrifice and wish to cross over to the further, fearless shore, which is the highest, imperishable Brahm. May we all master that Nachiketa fire. Know the body to be a chariot. Know the Atma, the soul, to be the master of the chariot. Know the intellect to be the chariot driver, and the mind as the reins. Know the senses as the horses that draw the body chariot. The objects of the senses are the roads the horses travel on, the paths they range over. The Atma in the body, with the senses and the mind, is the enjoyer, so say the wise. One who has no discrimination and understanding, whose mind is unrestrained and not in his control, his senses remain unmanageable and out of his control, just as the wild horses are out of the control of the chariot driver. He, however, who has discrimination and understanding, and whose mind is always under his control, his senses are always manageable and under his control, just as the good and trained horses are under the control of the chariot driver. He who has no understanding and who has no control over his mind and who is always impure, he does not reach the final goal but comes back to human life. He, however, who has understanding and who has control over his mind and who is always pure, he reaches that final goal of salvation from which he is not born again. He who has understanding of the body chariot, the driver of the body chariot, and the enjoyer self or the Atma, and who controls the horses, the senses of the body chariot with the reins of his mind, he reaches the end of the journey, which is the supreme abode of the all pervading Brahm. Beyond the senses are the objects of the senses. Beyond the objects of the senses is the mind. Beyond the mind is the understanding. Beyond the understanding is the great self, the Atma. Beyond the great self, the Atma, is the unmanifest. Beyond and greater than the unmanifest, greater than all else, is the Purush, the Spirit, the all pervading Brahm. There is nothing beyond the Purush, the Spirit. That is the final goal. That is the end of the journey. The Self, though hidden in all beings, does not shine forth, but it can be seen by the subtle seers through their sharp and subtle intelligence. The wise should restrain and control speech through the mind. The mind he should restrain and control through the understanding self. The understanding self he should restrain and control through the great self. The great self he should control through the supreme self, the Paramatma. Wake up and arise! Having attained your boons, understand them well. The path you have chosen, the path to the self, is sharp as the edge of a razor and very difficult to walk on, very difficult to follow. So say the sages of old. The self is without sound, it is without touch, it is without form, it is undecaying, it is without taste, it is without smell, it is without beginning, it is without end. It is beyond the great and it is ever abiding. By knowing and discerning that self, one is freed from the face of death. One does not have to die. The ancient story of Nachiketa, told by death, telling and hearing it, one becomes wise and great in the world of Brahma. Whosoever shall cause this supreme secret to be recited before an assembly of seekers of Brahm, or with devotion at the time of ceremonies for the dead, this will prepare him for everlasting life. This will prepare him for everlasting life. End of chapter 1, end of part 2 of Katha Upanishad. Om. Peace. Peace.